There's going to be both interesting positive impacts and pretty bad negative impacts.
Welcome to Social Situation, a podcast where we chat with and celebrate leaders challenging the status quo and creating innovations in social impact. Join us for conversations around the current and future state of social impact, the value of closing the gap between for-profits and nonprofits, and the importance of taking values-informed risks in order to create the greatest impact.
I'm Trevor Loke.
And I'm Erin Mogul.
And this is Social Situation. Welcome to Social Situation. Today we'll be uncovering the ever-changing world of artificial intelligence, or AI, and its impact on the social impact landscape. We'll talk to two incredible leaders, Craig Sanders, founder of Helpen, who are using AI to help their clients, and George Tzanetakis, professor of the University of Victoria, who teaches and researches artificial intelligence in its theory and practice. We're excited to be joined by these incredible guests today. Erin, like me, you've probably been overwhelmed by the amount of discussion on AI that's been happening all around us. I know many of our listeners are probably feeling the same way. I remember when ChatGPT launched, I guess about a year and a half ago, and my friend groups are really blown away at what this meant for them in their work and personal lives. And since then, I've seen AI show up in tools like Bing and Canva. And I'm wondering, Erin, is AI finding its way into your work and personal life?
That's such a great question, Trevor. And certainly AI is something I think about a lot as a business owner, and just as a person in this modern world, honestly, because it's hard to not kind of get sucked into the world of AI. We are seeing it in all aspects of life, not just in the professional world. We're hearing conversations of the impact of AI on young people's lives in the classroom, how this is fundamentally changing how we learn, how we connect with one another, how we run businesses, how we make an impact. So it's certainly something I think about. I think for me, I've definitely been a little bit more old school in how we kind of go from one new technology to the next, but I always appreciate and want to fully learn and immerse myself in new technologies as well, because I think it's really important to stay up to speed with what is current and what is resonating with the masses. But I definitely see the benefits of ChatGPT, especially if you have a question or you're looking to learn more about a certain topic. I mean, I remember the days of going to my Encyclopedia Britannica and trying to find answers in there pre-Wikipedia, pre-Google. So even in my relatively short life on this planet, we've seen incredible advances in how we learn and take in information. So definitely excited to see where we head next and to see what sort of tools are created and what sort of tools evolve that can support me in my business. And Trevor, I'd love to hear about your experience with artificial intelligence. How does it show up in your everyday life?
When it first came out, I thought, yeah, this is really impressive. But as much as ChatGPT and a lot of AI tools are getting big picture, broad things right, it is often getting the details incorrect. And we've heard about things like hallucinations, where AI will make things up if it doesn't know. And so I think there's a long way to go with the technology to certainly make it more applicable to people and make it more valuable to teams. But, when I think about it as, really the future of search at this point in time, specifically around ChatGPT, because, when we didn't know answers to questions before, a lot of the time we would go to Google to ask. And I think that is now being challenged directly by OpenAI and the ChatGPT tool, where people can ask a source a question and it can pull from multiple sources, as opposed to just giving you that single source reference like Google does. So I think from that standpoint, it's definitely a positive as an aggregator that can pull in multiple sources for verification. But I am still skeptical on the amount that it gets wrong. I think it's a great tool for people. I think one of the best skill sets we can start learning about is how to prompt these tools to help deliver more value. And that's something I'm definitely really interested in learning about.
We're definitely on the same page in terms of what AI can provide to us in terms of knowledge or information. What I gathered from what you shared is that we're still kind of seeing the space evolve, and maybe there will come a time where we don't have to add in our voice or kind of edit what we're getting in any certain way. But that's where our guests, Craig and George, come in, who are the true experts in all things AI. And I'm very excited for that conversation ahead. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
$60 billion is being given by companies to nonprofits in 2024 to maximize regulatory benefits and manage reputation for employees and customers. Some companies are struggling. The rest are using OrgMatch because OrgMatch optimizes this process, saving time and money required in due diligence, research, and administration, while increasing confidence in the impact and investment earned. That's why community investment teams around the world are trusting OrgMatch to get the job done. Find out for yourself by going to orgmatch.com. That's ORGMATCH.com to get started now for free. Welcome to Social Situation. We're honored to have Craig Sanders, founder of Helpen, and George Tzanetakis, professor at the University of Victoria, joining us today. Both are experts in AI and how to apply to social impact. We're thrilled to dive into this exciting, current topic with them today. Welcome both.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We brought you both together because, of course, you're experts in all things AI, which I am so excited to learn more about today. And we thought we'd start off by asking you each to share what you do and if there's a pivotal or standout moment, as you got into the world of AI that you're able to share with our listeners. George, we'll start with you, and then I'll pass it over to Craig.
I've been working in the use of what now we would call artificial intelligence techniques in the domain of music technology and music recommendation for close to 20 to 25 years. In terms of a standout moment, I think I would probably, there's a couple, but I would highlight in 2011, I took a study leave from the University of Victoria and I worked for Google Research. So that's the sort of part of Google that does the more kind of cutting edge stuff. I was involved in a couple of projects, and some of these projects have made it into products. So if you use your phone and you can sing a song and it will find what song it is, or if you record a recording and it finds who is the artist. That functionality is something I worked on back then. I also worked on some of the algorithms that are applied every time you upload music on YouTube. For me, it was interesting coming from academia to kind of work at the scale that Google operates, which is absolutely mind-boggling, like the amount of video that gets uploaded to YouTube daily and all the processing and the computing power, and seeing your things you have worked on being used by millions of users. So that would be my kind of standout moment in terms of AI and impact.
That's awesome. That must have been such an incredible experience. I do have a follow-up. Do you have a background in music, or is that a field that you kind of fell into by way of your knowledge of AI?
No, I have a pretty strong background in music. So I did study many years of piano and saxophone, and sort of around college time, I was sort of thinking about continuing as a professional musician when I finished my undergrad degree. Decided to go to graduate school, and somehow I had probably the best timing of ever in terms of doing this work right when computers were starting to be used to store music files. I kind of rode the wave of going from Napster to iPods to iTunes to Spotify. All this transformational change in how we hear music happened right at the right time for me. So I was very lucky that way. But yes, I do have a music background. I still play music, and I still hang out with a lot of music people.
Love that. Love the overlap between technology and music. That's fascinating. And Craig, I'd love to hear more about your work. So tell us what you do, and if there's a standout moment you've had in your AI journey, we'd love to hear.
My background is in finance and also fundraising for several nonprofits on the side, where I developed a massive passion for it and decided to leave to build Helpen, which is a philanthropic suite of tools that helps funders transform communities. And so we put a huge emphasis on location of impact. And our first product that we released is Helpen.ai, a place-based nonprofit search engine that allows funders to identify which nonprofits are transforming communities. And so we definitely leverage AI in this product. And again, it's really meant to kind of on this thesis that funders don't necessarily know your name. They are trying to find out what you do and where you do it. And so AI certainly helps us kind of deliver that experience through natural language search and kind of create these I guess, very entertaining or creative experiences. With regards to kind of AI for me is much more recent than George's experience. And, I think what caught my eye was, I want to say it was late of the kind of pandemic when OpenAI started releasing some tools, particularly around kind of image generation. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. Obviously nowhere near its capabilities now, but it was just something that I think people were making furniture out of fruit, right? And that caught my attention. And one pivotal moment for us, Helpen has seen its fair share of iterations or pivots, but one moment in particular was, I think, last year when the API first came out for OpenAI, and we were able to implement it into part of kind of a flow in our product that no one really kind of would have noticed. However, it saved us just a ton of time on something that was just such a pain. And you realize, okay, well, if this is what it's able to do now, where is it going to be in 2 to 3, 4 years? So that was those two moments really stick out for me.
Fantastic. I love the paths of both theory and application of AI in both of your stories. And George, I know you're working with graduate students day in and day out, at a highly sophisticated level. And yet, you're also hanging out with musicians and folks who maybe aren't experts in this space. So how do you translate that?
I mean, I think like with any technology, it can be used in different ways, and having some knowledge about it is useful, but it's also the type of knowledge you need to have is more on how you use it rather than how it works. So, like to use an analogy, if you have a chainsaw, you don't need to know how a chainsaw works inside. What is the, like, is it electric? Does it have gasoline? What you do need to know is to not put your hand and get it chopped off. So I think there's a difference between usage and kind of mechanism. I mostly am concerned with mechanism, but in terms of usage, it's really, there's going to be both interesting positive impacts and pretty bad negative impact. I guess it's just a matter of, being careful, thinking things through. There's a lot of hype. I tend to be a little bit cautious and a bit cynical, but I think you definitely can have these conversations quite easily, in the same way that you can talk about, I don't know, car safety in a downtown area without knowing how cars work or whether they're electric or gas powered. So that's kind of the way I approach it.
Oh, I really appreciate that answer, George. And Craig, would love to get your take on this too. I mean, you're trying to apply new AI applications in a world where, the ethics on this are still unclear. There's not a lot of regulation. How do you, talk about this with your peers, and how do you think about this when you're applying these to your products?
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably couldn't agree more with George on multiple points there. I think this conversation is really difficult to kind of have. And I don't think you can be liked and speak your mind fully at the same time. But let me first say that I truly believe there are some absolute positive outcomes on the horizon with regards to longevity, health, energy. So, just like anything, though, it does come with trade-offs, and there's going to be a lot of change on the horizon as well. And folks don't like change; they don't like uncertainty, and so I think that's what's making a lot of people uneasy with some of this stuff. I think George's point on really not having to have an understanding of how it's made or what's going on under the hood is so important. I think this technology is obviously inherited a lot from the movies and just from the hype around it over the years that people might be intimidated, especially maybe in the social impact space where they need to know how something works. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I think it is imperative that they just get started even trying to use it, whether it be a simple chat GPT. It doesn't have to be around kind of working, any type of work could be around cooking for all that matters. It's really just getting involved, being intellectually curious around, okay, this is going to be part of our life going forward, right? But if you can start thinking as it's going to be a tool that's being used, have this natural curiosity, I think the future will be a lot easier for everyone involved. But it's certainly going to be different.
I really appreciate you kind of reminding us that, we should be open and curious about this space. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainties, but there's definitely so much to be excited about. I have to say, Craig gave me an amazing Chat GPT tutorial about a month ago as well. And Craig, I want to kind of zero in a little bit more on the social impact space, since that's kind of the area that you were working in and of course have a background in as well. Trevor and I are fascinated by kind of the future of social impact. It's something we talk about a lot. So Craig, I'd love to hear how Helpen is redefining the social impact space, if you can speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I'll say on two fronts that really come to mind. First is we build really creative products around kind of place-based initiatives, right? And pun is intended here when I say we're planting our flag on location, where we believe that money is going to find the organizations that are willing and able to say, this is the community that we're uplifting, right? For funders, they are really going to reward organizations that are allowing them to kind of allocate their funds efficiently, right? So if a funder says, I have these 5 zip codes that I need to really support, great. They're going to send money or fund the organizations that are allowing them to achieve their goals easy, right? So I think in one aspect with regards to social impact, it's really about efficiency and transparency, two things that I think we can all agree the nonprofit space and the social impact space could use more of. Another part where it's a little bit further down our roadmap, but I think it's so important, and I think social impact will have a really big place for AI with this is around storytelling. I think anybody that's in the nonprofit space understands that storytelling is really ultimately what drives support, attracts funders. And there is going to be some amazing application with regards to storytelling. There are some really cool things on the horizon here that is going to enable or empower a lot of the great storytellers. And so I think that's going to have a very big positive impact on the social impact space.
That's great. Thank you so much, Craig. I think it's a really exciting and pivotal time for the social impact sector, having worked in nonprofits for over a decade and, wanting to see this work kind of get to the next level. But of course, understandably, nonprofits often, lack the resources or don't have the technology in place to move things to the next level. So I really think that AI is going to push things forward and hopefully affect change on a more rapid scale, and enable all of those, amazing folks that are trying to get the stories out.
And George, we worked together on a project with one of your PhD students that was kind of, going into some of the space that Craig was describing. But of course, there's so many applications for where AI could fit into this space. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are some of the underutilized areas for AI right now that maybe organizations could be looking into or taking advantage of that that you don't see a lot of traction on?
I think just simply the ability to produce more professional material is going to be extremely transformative. One of the ways to think about it is in the music space, actually. In some ways, I think music anticipates a lot of things. So today on this laptop that I'm doing the Zoom call, I can basically do all the processing that would like that in the 70s would require a studio that would have something like $100,000 of equipment. That's just not even AI. That's just simple software. We're going to be able to do things where you have an idea for a movie and you are an 18-year-old. You can make that movie on your laptop, and it will look just as good as the movies we have today. So that enables a whole set of it kind of in some ways equalizes the playing field. You can kind of compete with the big boys from your bedroom. So that's one aspect where I think it's going to provide a lot of transformation. I think the biggest challenge, I would say, this is for me the highest bar that still has not been achieved in AI, is basically sort of dialogue systems. The moment we have the case where you will call your phone company or your airline and you will prefer talking to an AI than talking to a human, that will be to me we finally reached the holy grail. But it's going to take time.
And what do you think is the biggest misconception that you find, when talking to folks about how to apply AI to, their work, their what a project, whatever it is that they happen to be doing? What are you hearing when you say, no, that's actually maybe not a good job for AI, or maybe that's not a good application for AI?
There's many problems where there's a simpler solution that doesn't require any intelligence and can get the job done. This is a little bit of a brutal example, but I like to use it a lot when I teach. People frequently mention self-driving cars as a way to reduce car accidents on the road. And their argument goes as something like, if 20% of cars on the road are self-driving and the probability of an accident of a self-driving car is that times lower than the probability of a human driver, that could save X amount of lives. There is a very simple technological fix that could be applied very quickly if there was will, which is to simply enforce speed limits on cars. Every car knows how fast it's going. Every car has GPS. Every car, it's the easiest thing to do to put something that would force a car on a 60-mile zone to go 60 miles. And if it goes above, or even have an override button for emergencies, and you can do any simulation that you want and show that that will save countless more lives than self-driving cars. AI has become a little bit of a badge of coolness for companies. So sometimes it's just used for problems where there is a simpler solution. And one of the challenges with AI is that you need a lot of data. And there are some domains where that's easy, but there are other domains where that's hard. So that's something to consider.
Thanks, George. That's really interesting. I think we're all trying to balance, when should we use AI in our daily life and when should we put it aside and kind of try ourselves first. Before we move on, I want to take a step back because I realized for our listeners, we didn't define AI. And I think a lot of people listening probably have an idea of it, but are not as well versed as either of you. How would you define what AI is? Craig, I'll start with you.
Okay. I would say it is computer programming that makes things more efficient. The way that I look at it is it takes a process that would take us a long time and it shortens the time, hopefully. Obviously, that depends on how accurate certain things are, but I think it can simplify a complex process.
Love it. Thank you. George, how about you?
I spend usually about an hour just over that topic when I teach AI, but I'll give you three levels of definition. The sort of original origin of the term was creating computer programs that would display some amount of learning and intelligence or do tasks that we consider require intelligence. So a lot of early AI was looking at things like proving theorems or playing chess or reasoning about like word games, things like that. As time went by, we go to level two, which is a definition I really like, which is that AI is any technique that makes us build machines that do things that machines do in movies. We imagine what machines can do, they do that in movies, and then we make that be a reality. What happened is that a certain approach to building systems, which was based on analyzing extremely large amounts of data, was labeled AI. even though to some extent, so for example, creating furniture made out of fruit, that is not something that has anything to do with intelligence or anything we can do very well. It's just this weird, unexpected way to do something that is very different. So when you look at modern AI, there's things like deep fake, digital content creation that are really not anything to do with intelligence, but they are labeled AI. And there are other things like dialogue systems, large language models, storytelling that you could make a more valid argument that are closer to what humans kind of do and operate with. So that's my three levels, and I could go on and on, but I'll stop here.
That's great. Thank you both so much. It's really good to have, that definition going along with our conversation today. And I guess with that, I'd love to talk about how AI is transforming. Obviously, there have been incredible innovations that we've seen in recent months, even. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And also, if you think we should be concerned about the rate at which AI is transforming and innovating in our daily lives.
The speed of transformation is also something that one has to be a bit cautious when you are at a very transformative period. You tend to think that it's going to last forever. So a classic example that I like to use is the airplanes. So if you went back 120 years, you basically have contraptions made out of wood and a few pieces of canvas and a little engine with a propeller. And that's what you call an airplane. And it flies, just does a little jump. And then you go to World War II and you have, a Spitfire and big bombers and things like that. And, clearly a modern plane is a completely different beast. But to some extent, when you get on a jetliner and fly to Europe today, it's not that much different than 30 years ago. In fact, actually, some of those planes are 30 years old. So to some extent, the rate of change has been reduced. It's still evolving. I could be wrong, but I feel like there was a big rate of acceleration in terms of visual processing AI around the 2010, 2015 frame. And then there was the OpenAI, ChatGPT, large language model kind of fast acceleration. But my sense is that it's slowing down and it has plateaued a bit. That may not be what OpenAI wants you to think or NVIDIA wants you to think, but having used consistently ChatGPT, doesn't seem to be getting better. And one of the things is you're always fascinated with all the times it works, but you don't notice as much when it doesn't work. And as time goes by, those become more apparent. So, in terms of being concerned, I think there's very valid concerns. It's hard to know what they will be, right? Like if we time travel back to when Facebook became kind of from a little website where you would connect with your university friends to the social mega thing that's today. um, I don't think anyone, either in the company or outside the company, could have predicted the types of negative impact that now everyone to different degrees recognizes. Maybe people will argue how bad those are, but you can't know beforehand, right? It's just it takes a bit of time to figure that out. But on the other hand, I do believe that regulation is important, and there needs to be some checks and balances, and you can't just have an unconstrained growth. And so that's again a very deep topic. We could talk forever, but I'll stop here.
Thanks, George. Craig, how about you? What are your thoughts on the rate at which AI is growing and transforming, and should we be concerned at all?
So I do agree with George a little bit on, the performance of ChatGPT has certainly not been consistent as of late, and so that can lend to some concern about its quality as time goes on. I do differ a little bit, though, just from obviously a different perspective. As you're building with a lot of these tools, you do get a sense that, things are moving extraordinarily quick. And just to give you a kind of a perspective on the way that we kind of look at it is, you have the ability for some time now to upload, several PDFs. And you can ask those, leveraging AI, you can ask those PDFs a couple questions and what they call a context window, right? So it has just as much information in this particular context window that it can ask a PDF. After a certain amount, it's too much information and the quality drops off. Recently, Google had released Gemini 1.5, which is a model that basically can hold upwards of, I think, 700,000 words or maybe 1,000 PDFs. And when you start thinking about that, just think about kind of what that ultimately does to knowledge work, right? It kind of gives everyone access to a lot of this information, but it also kind of commoditizes it. And so I think it's a lens to have to where you can understand, like, okay, well, this is moving very quickly, relatively speaking, in the last 365 days of the ability to search PDFs and get, a lot of information out of them without having to do the long work of reading them. I think there's a really good example on LinkedIn lately of kind of showing the difference between the video models from 365 days ago. There was a famous one where someone had asked or prompted Will Smith to eat pasta. And so and I can send it to you. It's a crazy one. Obviously you can tell it's him, but it's not very well done. And then just this past couple of weeks, they released Sora, the model Sora, where it gives almost, professional movie quality results. And so obviously there's errors involved in that. But my entire point of that is that it is increasing at an increasing rate. If you zoom in, there's going to be stumbles, but the speed is something to certainly consider. And as a builder in it, you almost feel like the moment that you've implemented something, you have to upgrade again. And so that obviously requires a different type of building. For the nonprofit sector in general, I think it's just something to be definitely aware of. We need to start putting an emphasis less on wisdom or knowledge in a job and more about the ability to have agility, to kind of read and react or adapt to a lot of what's going to be coming towards us. I think there's going to be a lot less value of saying, oh, I've spent 20 years in an industry, and more along the lines of more value to someone that can say, hey, in the last 2 years, I've learned these different types of tools and seen how they can work together in unique ways. I think that's going to be the future of education, at least for the younger generation. And it's going to be something very important for folks, in adulthood, and especially in the nonprofit space, to say, look, I need to learn how to adapt, to be more agile with a lot of technology.
Love those answers. And, I think too, to a point that was made earlier around this being a great equalizer. And I think that has to do a lot with the rate of acceleration that people are experiencing. If you traditionally are well-resourced or have access to the best tools, I do think your point, George, around things slowing down is probably very true for those at the top. I think for those more grassroots organizations or those at the bottom who haven't had traditional access to, be able to, produce a video on their laptop or something, it is massively transformative and a huge accelerant. So I think it depends too on, how are things being applied and where do you sit on this social hierarchy that AI is certainly having different impacts on throughout. So thinking about that, thinking about your work and the legacy that you're building for both of yourselves, I'm curious about where you see each of yourselves in 10 years time and where the work you're going today is leading toward that. So Craig, maybe we can start with you.
Definitely. So, I had mentioned that our first product that we released is Helpen.ai, which is that place-based nonprofit search engine that is free. Ultimately, we're building our flagship platform that we have not yet released, which is really a market intelligence platform around climate and sustainable development philanthropy. We're ultimately going to be highlighting funding flows and streamlining compliance screenings to reduce risk for funders, especially those deploying capital in emerging markets. So the entire thought is to make it easy for allocators to fund climate projects at the speed and scale necessary to reach a lot of those net zero goals. So with that in mind, when you talk about 10 years from now, we will have created that source of truth for these funding flows into some of the most important projects in the world. And so that's kind of large vision, but aggressive vision. But that's what I see.
Thank you. And George, would love to hear your plans for the next 10 years.
I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting applications of AI. My main guiding principle is to select things that I think are not that interesting to the big players in the industry. They're sort of smaller topics. But also one thing I'm particularly interested is learning and skill acquisition. I think even to this day, we know that if you want to learn a foreign language or chess or whatever, or basketball, there's still the best way to do it is to get a human to mentor you and teach you. But we are limited by time and by availability and resources, and you can't do that all the time. So I really think that a good way for AI is to move into how can you use these techniques to create a better learning experience, not replacing necessarily the human, but augmenting the human or providing the human when the human is not available. So, if a kid can play basketball wearing virtual reality goggles and somehow, there's some kind of AI robotic contraption that blocks shots and plays defense and can adjust and can do things, and it looks like you're playing with a human player, and I know that sounds quite science fiction like, that could be interesting. So in the sphere of music, that's something that we are looking at, is that there's, if I'm lucky and I have applied for a big grant with NSERC. If that comes through, it would be 5 institutions, 11 faculty members, about 110 graduate students over about 5 years or 6 years, all in the general area of music and AI and exploring the implications. Yeah, and I think it's finding these sort of more niche, interesting things that nobody cares about, or at least the big players don't care about. Another thing that I find really fascinating is the idea of recreating historical environments. So, sort of the Star Trek holodeck idea of could I go and play saxophone in a jazz club in New York in 1960 with musicians who are now dead but are reanimated by AI. And it's not a movie, it's an immersive, interactive experience. I can talk to them, I can play with them, they listen to what I play, I hold my actual saxophone. So I can spend days explaining all the technical challenges that we need to solve to get there. But for me, that would be a really good, interesting application of AI. Now, obviously, the same technology can be used for very nefarious purposes, but I'm going to focus on the good side.
I love that. I'm so inspired by you both. George, I would love to go to that 1960s jazz club. So once that's created, let me know. I want to take advantage of that opportunity, but I'm really excited for the innovations you both are making, the positive impact you're having in the world. I know that in, just a few months, if, not even 10 years, you all are going to be making so much change and transformation. So I'm really grateful to connect with you both. I know Trevor and I have both learned so much from you today, but sadly our time is up. So I want to thank you so much, and thank you everyone, all of our listeners, for tuning into Social Situation. Again, huge thanks to our amazing guests, Craig Sanders and George Tzanetakis, for joining us. Please consider connecting with them both on LinkedIn to learn more about the impactful and innovative work they're doing. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a short break, and we'll be right back. Looking to make an impact, but not sure where to start? Elevate Social Impact, a purpose-driven consulting and coaching practice, helps companies develop their CSR strategies and embed a culture of giving back into their brand. And they guide individuals looking for fulfilling careers in social impact. Whether you're wanting to grow your company's give back efforts or find values alignment and make a greater difference through your work, Elevate Social Impact is excited to equip you with the knowledge, resources, and tools that you need to get started. Check out elevatesocialimpact.com today to learn more. Welcome back. It's time for us to share what's on our mind. Trevor, what has been on your mind lately?
So, Erin, what I'm thinking about today is a podcast. Unsurprisingly, we're on a podcast, and I wanted to share with listeners a podcast that I'm have keep coming back to time and time again. It is Pivot with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher. I think it's very on brand with this episode because the podcast is really focused on the space around technology, really what's happening around big tech firms, the future of data, the future of business. There's a lot of discussion on Pivot around things like artificial intelligence and metaverse. They will talk about anything from the political implications of things in the news, like the TikTok ban, to new products that are coming onto the market. And so I'm thinking about the Pivot podcast as a good recommendation for listeners listening to this episode who might be interested in these types of topics around technology and the broader world to give Pivot a try. It's an easy podcast to find, one of the top business podcasts. And yeah, just a shout out to the co-hosts. Scott Galloway is a professor marketing at NYU Stern School of Business, successful startup founder in different marketing and technology spaces. And Kara Swisher has been a journalist for over 30 years in technology, reporting originally with the San Francisco Chronicle, but is now been with New York Times, Washington Post, Wired magazine. So yeah, very impressive hosts who I think provide a lot of insight. And talk a lot about issues. And just the last thing I'll say about the podcast is it's one of the few spaces where I hear co-hosts talking about really difficult issues, even when they may disagree with each other, and they are doing it in a respectful manner where they are really open to different and diverse opinions. So that's my recommendation for today, Erin. How about you? What are you thinking about?
I had a really interesting experience a few weeks ago. So I was leaving my Pilates class and just kind of standing on the sidewalk, and I saw Google's self-driving car, Waymo. And I thought I was in an alternate universe, to be honest, because I saw a car coming down the street and there was no driver. And I'd never seen this before. This was here in Los Angeles. I'd never seen one in New York City. So definitely wasn't something I was expecting to see. And it was just a really kind of out of body experience. I was watching it. It was interesting. The car kind of pulled to the side to let another car go, which if you or I were driving the car, we wouldn't necessarily pull over. We would just let that car pass. So it was just interesting to see how it drove almost extra carefully, considering there was not a person in there. I couldn't tell if there were passengers in the back as part of this kind of test drive. But there was certainly no one in the driver's seat nor in the front passenger seat. So it was really interesting. And it definitely got me thinking about, kind of where we've come from, where we're going, the advances that we've seen in such a short amount of time. I think about when I was a kid and computers were this, new and exciting thing that people were starting to have in their homes, but, it was pretty limited to, maybe emails, some Word docs. I think there was that game with the snowman that you would throw snowballs at the snowman going down the ski hill or something like that. I don't know if you knew that one. In my relatively short life, I've seen incredible advances, and I can't even imagine for people, in older generations. And it kind of got me thinking about, this fear that I have, that humans are being replaced by machines, but also the great value and opportunity that technology can bring to society. There's so many pluses and minuses, and there's so much change happening. And I think for me, it's the rate of that change that has me worried a little bit, but also excited to see where we're going. I definitely go back and forth in terms of excitement and fear and curiosity and interest when I encounter these new things. So yeah, definitely a very interesting experience to see a self-driving car, and excited to, kind of continue these conversations that we're having today in terms of the impact of AI and just kind of technology in general in our daily lives, not just in our professional lives, but really it is impacting all of us. So definitely appreciate our conversation today and look forward to continuing to dive into this topic throughout future episodes. Social Situation is co-hosted by me, Erin Mogul, Trevor Loke, and presented by Elevate Social Impact and OrgMatch. Editing is by Tristan Thompson. New episodes are released on the second Thursday of every month. Visit socialsituationpodcast.com to learn more or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.